Angularis fundamentum labis Christus visus est.
So, Julian, it's really very kind of you to allow me to come and talk with you today about Schola Gregoriana. You are the chairman of the Trustees, and in that capacity, on top of other friendship that we have, means that I'm mostly in contact with you in my own work as well with Schola Gregoriana. And so I know that many people would be very interested to know something of your vision for Schola Gregoriana for the future. But perhaps, just out of curiosity, they might like to know something of your musical upbringing, if you'd be kind enough to say something about that.
That seems logical to me, and I think that the interesting thing about the chant in my life, the place of Gregorian chant in my life, is that I started my education at Westminster Cathedral, and at the time when I was 7 years old, the whole life of Westminster Cathedral revolved very much around the liturgy, and the classical Roman liturgy with the sung High Mass every day of the week, and some of the offices too, such as Vespers on Sundays. I think I'm afraid, I have to say that my appreciation of it at that time was fairly minimal. I was much more concerned, I think, about sort of having been extracted from the family to live this life of a chorister. It seemed to me quite austere circumstances as they were then. But nevertheless, I think that the influence of the chant and the whole liturgical life of the cathedral must at some level have permeated my whole being, even though in some ways I was possibly fighting against it. But these things that influence you at that sort of age remain with you for the rest of your days, for better or for worse. The time that I was undergoing this initiation was when George Malcolm was ruling the roost musically at the cathedral, and he was quite a daunting figure. Later on I got to know him very well, but in those days I think most people were hugely in awe of him, if not absolutely terrified. But I think at heart he knew exactly what he wanted to achieve, and knew that he could only achieve it with a fair degree of ruthlessness. That would not be at all politically correct today. But that's how it was then. And now I think people take a different attitude to teaching generally. And well, you would know from your work in Paris with that Academy Vocale, which was young people, yes. Perhaps not that young, but the balance between authority and discipline and actually drawing out musicality and something that's going to work artistically is very delicate, and I suppose that George evolved his way of doing it, which was fairly direct, and in your work must have worked out a modus vivendi which appealed to the people you were working with and yet got what you wanted at the same time. So anyway, for better or for worse, that's how it all started, and in retrospect, I'm enormously grateful to have had that opportunity.
You're part of an important musical family, and we're sitting here in this magnificent music room. It's interesting you mentioned George Malcolm, because when I look at the many instruments that fill this room, it seems that it's possible to play keyboard music of almost every, if not of every period.
I hope.
And
Yes.
that is
Yes.
I think George was remarkable in that respect.
Yes, he was. Yes.
Keyboard player as well.
Yes.
Just as a side,
Yeah. No, but you're right to refer to that, because I managed to remain in touch with him really for pretty well the rest of his days. Later on, I went on to the Royal College of Music and did keyboard studies there. George always took an interest in his ex-choristers, and we were able to keep in touch, and he was an inspiration. I think that he gradually had sort of mellowed and was probably much more approachable as time went on. But he was a real inspiration as a keyboard player as well as a choir trainer. In fact, I mean, it was always said about him that he, when he left the Royal College of Music as a sort of teenager, he could have done so many different things. He could have been any kind of musician. He was a sort of polymath musically, and was he could turn his hand to anything musical, I think. And the harpsichord thing happened almost by accident. He didn't set out to be a harpsichordist, as you know. He dipped his toe in the water of early music, and at that time practically nobody else was playing the harpsichord. And I think something about it appealed very much to him, but even if the harpsichord hadn't existed, he'd have made his way, I think, as a very fine pianist, or during the war, of course, he was conducting military bands, and so he could turn his hand to a lot of things musically, and always very compellingly.